Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming to today's Play Attention webinar. My name is Gwen Sorley, and I will be your host today. I really do appreciate you taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit more about executive function and how Play Attention can develop a customized plan to actually improve executive function so that we can all stop working so hard. And today we're going to be talking about executive function. That is a big term for something we use all day long. And many of you are really very familiar with executive function, and some of you, this may be a newer term for you. So we're going to review it and share so that we all perhaps have a better understanding and can reflect on attention and executive function, perhaps from a new perspective. So, executive function is what helps us start tasks, stay focused, control impulses, manage time, remember what we're doing, handle emotions, and follow through. So, like I said, it's a big term for things that we do throughout our day, every day. And when executive function is weak or inconsistent, it may cause our lives to start feeling harder than they should. And when you might notice that not only in yourself, but you may notice it in your child or in your clients, because many of you are here for different reasons. You might be here because you, as an adult, you may be struggling at work, or you're maybe struggling with keeping up with the everything you need to do at home and everything you need to do at work. You may be here because you have a really bright child who seems to know what to do, but just can't seem to figure out how to get started. Or you may be a professional here and you have a client who is trying really hard, but daily life still seems to be somewhat of a struggle. So, whether you're here for yourself or a family member or a client, or perhaps all of the above, it's really important to keep in mind why we're here. And we're going to focus our discussion so that we are not focusing on blaming effort. In fact, many people with ADHD and executive function challenges are working incredibly hard. How many of you can relate to that? You can use the raise your hand icon or type in the chat box. Okay, a lot of you are raising your hand quite rapidly. You're feeling like you're working really hard. And you may see that, at the end of the day, you think, I have been busy all day long, and yet I didn't accomplish anything. Do any of you have those feelings? Okay. Yeah, a lot of you are responding that you can relate to that, right? So again, what the question should really become, what if the problem is not effort? What if the problem is the skill system underneath the effort? That's what we're going to unpack today. So here's a quick question to get us started. And I want you to type your answer in the chat box. What is one task that takes more effort than it should? And if you're thinking about yourself personally, type in your answer for yourself. If you're thinking about your child, maybe it's the effort or the task that your child is struggling with. So, in the chat box, if you would, so that we can share, what is one task that takes more effort than it should? It could be homework, it could be paying bills, answering emails, getting out the door. Go ahead and type in the chat box. Edna says clinical progress notes. Okay. Cheryl, child, keeping school papers organized. Stacy Ann says cooking. Mariette says my voice is echoing. That might be on your side. Is anyone else experiencing my voice echoing? Just let me know. It may be on your side, Mariette. Charmaine says doing online shopping returns. Chris says anything where I have to do deep reading comprehension. Jesse dealing with my autistic wife. Uh, and then other people are saying no feedback on their side. So, Mariette, you might want to check if you have multiple apps open right now. Alan says, finishing dissertation. Guess it's one big overall task, right? There are a lot of skills you need in order to complete that. So you all have really great answers and very diverse. Nicole says, any admin forward tasks, and my new job is administrative, and any reading. Okay. So it sounds a couple of you are having challenges with reading, reading comprehension, administrative tasks, note taking. Um, Oh, Efren says, my son takes a long time to get up in the morning. Part of the reason is he goes to bed so late. Okay. So, uh, and Shelly says self. She's looking at this for herself or answering for herself. Anything that needs any reading. Okay. Again, reading seems to be a reoccurring theme or concentration. Okay. So thank you for sharing those. And as we look at those answers and share, I want you to notice that look at your answer and think about what everyone else said. These are not character flaws. These are not signs that you or your child do not care. Many of these challenges are directly connected to executive function. A lot of people think that focus is just one skill. And so you may think, I just need to pay attention, right? Why can't I just pay attention? I think the last one, Shelley said, anything that requires concentration. So you may be thinking, why can't I just pay attention and concentrate? But the fact is that focus is not just one thing. We say it all the time, right? Just pay attention, just pay attention. But it's not just paying attention. Focus and attention are a combination of skills. And it's broken out here on your slide. If you think about everything that's required for focus, focus is a team effort inside the brain. First, you have to notice what matters, right? So, first, you have to notice what matters, whether it's that writing assignment, the homework assignment, the reading that you need to do, your dissertation, whatever it may be. First, you have to recognize what matters. That's the first step. Then you have to be able to block out distractions, right? You have to filter out because when we hear about attention deficit, that's really a misnomer, right? No one has a complete deficit of attention. If you're really interested in something, you can hyper focus. But usually, if you have ADHD or if you watch your child with ADHD, it's not that they have a lack of attention, they have great attention. It's just scattered over a variety of things. So once we determine what matters, what we need to pay attention to, then we have to be able to sustain our attention to that task and filter out all of that unnecessary stimuli. Okay, and that might be external, it may also be internal. Then you have to hold your goal in mind. You have to manage frustration because oftentimes, if you've been struggling with attention or struggling with reading comprehension, you might have some emotional responses. So you have to manage any type of frustration, emotion regulation. You have to resist your impulsivity, right? So if something pops up on your social media or your phone dinks, you have to resist your impulsive nature to shift your attention and grab that phone call or that look at that text message or check your social media. So you have to be able to resist those impulsive urges. You also have to track your time. You have to shift when necessary because we talked about hyper focus, and some of you here think, oh, yeah, I can hyper focus. And hyperfocus can be one of your superpowers, right? It can be a very powerful thing because you can complete amazing tasks. But we have to learn how to manage our hyperfocus because there are times you have to be able to shift your attention. I have a lot of our adult clients who will say, I hyperfocus, which is great at times, but sometimes I'm so hyperfocused, I forget to eat, I forget to sleep. My partner comes in and wants to have a conversation that's important, and I don't shift my attention. So I miss conversations and I cause difficulties within our relationship. So you have to be able to shift, transition when necessary. You also have to be able to return to the task once that shift is no longer necessary. How do you return to that task? Or if your attention does start to drift, how do I bring myself back to that task? So you look here, all of these skills are focus. It's not just focus, just pay attention. It's a combination. It is that team effort in the brain that is required for attention or focus. And if one or more parts of that team are weak or tired or overwhelmed or underdeveloped, daily tasks can feel exhausting. So I'm going to take a quick poll right now, and I have it on screen. You can see it there, but I'm going to actually launch the poll so that you can type in your answer, or you can actually plug in your answer here. Let's do this quick poll. Which executive function skill feels hardest right now? And again, if you're considering this conversation for yourself, just answer for yourself, but maybe it's your child or your client, you can respond for them. Which executive function skill feels hardest right now? It may be getting started, staying on task, emotion regulation, impulse control. It may be difficult to decide, but what do you think is hardest? What came first to mind? All right, and I'm going to end the poll in three, two, one. Okay. So 62% of you, most of you said getting started is the hardest task right now. 14% of you said staying on task. 10% said emotion regulation, and impulse control, another 14%. So getting started was 62%, staying on task and impulse control were tied at 14% of you, and emotion regulation was most challenging for 10% of you. So this is helpful because it shows us something really important. For one person, it's most challenging getting started. For another, it's staying with that task. For another, it's controlling emotions and impulse control. That's why when we look at executive function challenges, a one size approach solution is not the answer, right? There is no such thing as one size fits all when we're developing solutions. We need to understand the pattern in order to create a customized plan. So, one way I like to think about executive function is you can think of it as the brain's ultimate project manager. Okay, it's the brain's management system. It helps run the show. It helps answer questions like, what should I ignore? What should I do first? That was the number one thing for most of you. What do I do first? Just that task initiation is challenging. What should I ignore? Remember, that's the ability to filter unnecessary stimuli. What do I do when I get frustrated? Because a lot of you said that emotion regulation was one of those challenges. And for some of you, it was the most challenging. So when frustration occurs, what do I do when I get frustrated? How do I stop myself before I act? That's the impulse control. How do I remember the next steps? That's your working memory. How do I keep going when the task is boring, right? If you have to have that sustained attention to a non-preferred task, it may be a little bit mundane. How do you stick with it? And how long will this take? Okay, so again, bringing all of this together, when executive function is working well, daily life can be more manageable. You can answer all of these questions. But when it's not working well, what do you think of another individual when you're looking at your child who just will not start their homework? Do you ever think, why is he so unmotivated? Or have you ever had that comment made to you? Have people asked you why you're unmotivated? That's often a misunderstanding. Many times, when executive function is not working well and life seems unmanageable, then it may look like that individual is unmotivated or distracted or too emotional or too forgetful. They're just disorganized. Or I often hear, especially from teachers, they'll say, she's just oppositional. She just won't do what I ask. So I think that many times that is a misunderstanding because underneath those behaviors, there's often a skill set that needs support. And I think that's what we need to recognize. Can any of you share? Have you experienced that at all? Or maybe in the past you thought, oh, my daughter, she's just unmotivated. But when you really started looking a little bit deeper, you noticed that it wasn't a lack of motivation, that there were actually skills that needed support. Anyone of you can relate to that? Okay. Many of you are raising your hands. Chris says every day at work. Jesse says, yes, I forget all the time. Stacy Ann says, yes, she can relate. Shelley says, I hear these all day long. Nicole says, every day. So I think that is how we have to change the conversation and change the perception. This individual is not being oppositional or unmotivated. We have to look deeper and look at the skill sets that we can support. Because this is where we fall into a trap, right? I call it the effort trap. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. And so the effort trap often sounds like this: just try harder, right? Just pay attention. Just stop forgetting and get started. Just calm down. Use your planner. Why aren't you using a checklist? Just be more responsible. Okay. Have you ever heard these things, or maybe you've said these things? Yeah, many of you are saying yes, you have. And you may have said these things, or other people may have said these things to you with good intentions. However, if the brain has not yet developed the skills to do these things consistently, more pressure is not the solution. Saying just try harder is not a solution. It doesn't solve the problem. What does it do if someone looks at you and says, I need you to try harder, I need you to do better, I need you to use your planner? Does it solve the problem? Or what happens in this situation? Shelley says, I say these to myself and I hear it from others. But Shelley, what is your reaction when you hear these things or when you say these things to yourself? What happens? What is your reaction? Okay, a lot of you are responding. Chris says frustration. Edna says anger and sadness. Shelley says, I feel like I'm at fault. Charmaine says, I feel frustrated and like a failure. Madeline says discouragement. Right. So just saying these things creates frustration. Embarrassed adds to the frustration, Sherry says. Absolutely. So it's just adding to the frustration. It's not solving a problem. It's actually based on everything that you say, you used really important words. Feel like a failure, discouragement, frustration, embarrassed, frustration again. So it's just adding and creating more stress. And stress is not conducive to good attention. When the brain is stressed, overwhelmed, and anxious, attention actually becomes harder. So when you say, just try harder, just focus, and you're causing that stress, focus actually becomes even more difficult because that stress is not conducive to good attention. And working memory, when you're stressed, working memory actually reduces, it becomes weaker, and self control becomes more difficult. So the person who's supposed to try harder gets more frustrated, like you said, and then feels like they failed again, like someone else said here. And this is that cycle. This is that cycle that we get into, that effort trap. This is the cycle we want to interrupt with a very specific plan. Okay, so this is what I call the executive function reset. We want to notice, name, train, and then transfer. Okay, this is our reset that we're doing here. So, how do we go about this? First, we have to notice what is actually happening. Okay, so in this moment, when we're noticing that we're not making progress, we have to first stop, take a pause, and instead of blaming yourself or putting the blame on others or blaming the lack of effort, let's take a moment to really look at what is happening. Is the person simply not able to get started? Is the Has the person started but drifting? Are you rushing through things? Are you forgetting steps? Are you having some emotional reaction? So maybe a little bit of an emotional meltdown? Are you avoiding? What is actually happening? That's all we want to do first. Not take any other actions, just pause and notice what's happening. Okay. Second, after you notice what's truly happening, then we can name it, right? Once we know what's happening, then we can truly name it. What exact executive function skill may be involved here? Is this attention that we're looking at? Is it working memory because they can't remember the steps? Is it impulse control because you notice they're rushing through? That executive function is impulse control. Is it time management? Is it emotion regulation? Or is it task initiation? So see, you can connect what's truly happened when you start at noticing, then you're looking at that next step, which is name the executive function skill related to it. So if they're rushing, that means that impulse control is difficult. If they're forgetting the steps, then working memory is compromised. If it's they can't get started, that's task initiation. Those are specific executive function skills. Okay. Then Efron says, I think is more forgetting what they need to do. Yeah, and that Efron is part of working memory. Okay. And one thing that you brought up earlier was not only the frustration level, but also the lack of sleep. And remember, sleep is critically important to attention and memory. So that's something that you really want to address as well. So, first, we notice what's going on. Then, if it's like Efren said, for Efren, it's forgetting what they need to do. So that's related to naming it, which is working memory. And then third is where we can start training. So we have to stop relying on reminders and tips and strategies, but actually get to the root cause and start developing underlying skills. And then when we start developing underlying skills, then we can start transferring and generalizing. That's our fourth step, where we're developing skills And then we can help those skills show up in real life at school, at work, at home, during homework, during a work assignment, or if you're in a work meeting, during chores. So we're going to notice, then name it, then we have to start training, and then we work on that transfer and generalization. So that's the reset where we move from why won't this person just do it, right? Why won't my child just do his homework? Or why can't I just get through this work assignment? And so I don't have to bring all my work home over the weekend. Or why is my client seems to know the strategies we discuss in our session, but why aren't they applying them? So we're going to move from that question to what skill does the brain need to strengthen? That's the shift. That's the reset, because that shift is what actually matters. Okay. So let's just take a quick moment to do an interactive exercise. Let's practice this together. Okay. Because if we practice it now, then you can better recognize it and put it into action in your day to day life. So, for right now, I want you to think of one task that takes more effort than it should. Okay. Just think of one task. There may be many that you're struggling with or that your child is struggling with, but let's just think of one task. Okay. Clear all those other tasks out of your mind and think of one task that takes more effort than it should. And you can type it in the chat box. That's a great idea. Shelley wrote down reading, because if you type it in, it might help you remember what you're focusing on. Okay. It might be reading. Edna says progress notes. Okay. You brought that up earlier. Chris also reading. It might be starting a report or cleaning a room, answering emails. Jan says organizing. Okay, so keep that one task in mind. Now ask yourself, what is the hardest part? Okay, what is the hardest part? Christine, if wrapping up notes at the end of the day is difficult, what is the hardest part? Is it starting the task? Is it staying with it? Remembering the steps, ignoring distractions, managing frustration, finishing. So you know the task that's hardest. What is the hardest part of it? Okay. What is the hardest part? Okay. Now take that word and think about that word and write the executive function skill that's involved. Okay. And if you're not sure, you can type, I'm not sure. Efron said, remembering what he needs to do in order to get started. That's working memory. So if you're not sure, you can ask, what is the executive function? So this is where we're identifying the skill. We're not just labeling that person as unmotivated or lazy, but we're identifying the skill that's challenging. Christine says focus refocusing. So that's sustained attention. That's an executive function skill. And that refocusing is that mental flexibility, right? Being able to regain that attention to the original task. Okay. Let's see. Planning and organization, Nomi says. Okay. And that is part of executive function. Planning, organizing, that is executive function. Jesse says, I can't even remember a phone number as the person is saying it to me. And that is, Jesse, a combination of skills. And most of these things that we're talking about are a combination. So, yes, remembering a phone number is short-term memory, but you have to be able to pause, right? and get the brain ready to remember. So that's that you have that attention. And then you have to be able to take in that information, filter out distractions, and hold that information in order to respond or in order to retell that phone number. Christine says maybe managing impulses, refocusing from that. Charmaine says procrastination. And Charmaine, you bring up a really important word, procrastination. Procrastination is a lot of people think that the executive function skill that's tied to procrastination is time management, but it's not. The executive function skill tied to procrastination is emotion regulation. That means that it's not so much your time management, but it's about how you feel about that task, how you feel about your ability to complete that task. That's what's really challenging. So, Christine, was it Christine? No, Charmaine, sorry. When we're looking at developing a plan for improving the ability to not procrastinate, we're going to really be looking at that part of executive function, which is emotion regulation. Okay. Nicole says reading anything, whether it's an email or reading through training manuals, I have to create, and procrastination is big when I have to start anything I'm unsure of. So Nicole just hit it on the head right there, right? Her procrastination kicks in when she's having challenges with emotion regulation. She doesn't know or she's not sure of something, so she's having an emotional response, and that's why procrastination occurs, and that's why task initiation can be so challenging. Very good. Excellent. So these are all, I can't read all of them, but many of you have brought up really important key words that I want you to keep in mind. So take a moment to notice what's happening at that moment, and then really consider what's occurring and then name the executive function skill that is challenging at that moment. Once we can name it, then we can move on to actually creating a plan. And we have to create a systematic plan that actually gets to the root cause and starts developing that skill. Because how many of you have tried tips and strategies? You've seen them on YouTube and you think, that strategy is going to work for me. So you put that strategy into play and it just falls apart. It does not work the way that influencer told you it was going to work. Have any of you experienced that where you try the tips and the strategies and you buy the fancy planner and you get a beautiful calendar with stickers and colored pencils and it still doesn't work? You get your child that new organizer and homework still isn't getting home and it's still not making it back to school. Any of you experiencing that? Yeah, a lot of you are saying yes. Shelley says, I have 20 notebooks and memo pads. That's right. And that's why, the notebooks and the memo pads are great. We want you to have those. However, at some point, we have to get to the root cause because notebooks and memo pads, planners and timers, those can organize the task, but it does not build the attention system you need in order to use them, right? Tutoring, have any of you tried tutoring with your child? Tutoring can have a place, right? Because it can teach the academic content. But in my experience, and I've been using Play Attention with my clients since 1996, so I've had a lot of younger clients who have gone to tutoring and then they get back to school and they're still struggling and the parents can't understand why. And typically that individual is so smart, is so bright. It's not that they can't do the academic work. It's not that they don't understand the material. Usually they're as bright or brighter than the other students in the class. It's that they have to have cognitive control in all of these skills. They have to be able to sustain their attention, process the information, control their impulsivity, have strong working memory so that they can remember the steps in the assignment. So tutoring can have a place, but if it's weak executive function, we have to get to the root cause and start developing skills. You may have tried generic brain training apps that can offer some practice, but it doesn't measure real time attention. You might find that when you're going through some brain training apps or little games on your phone or on your computer, that you start just going through the motions. They're not really accurately measuring your attention. And the challenge with those too is oftentimes you get better in the game, but we don't hit that critical fourth step, which is transfer and generalization. You might be getting better in the game, but not necessarily applying those skills in other areas. And medication, again, can play a role. Medication works for many people by controlling symptoms, but medication doesn't teach any skills or change behaviors. So we don't want to medicate and fail to educate. We want to use that time to start developing skills. And that's where play attention comes in. And that's what makes play attention so different from every other program available. Play attention actually integrates feedback technology with cognitive skill training and behavior shaping to provide you with the most comprehensive approach available. Sherry says ADHD is inconsistent and the different help is also inconsistent. That's a really good way to say it. And Sherry, you're right. It's not a lack of attention. It's not a deficit in attention, a deficit in working memory, a deficit in all of these areas. You see glimpses of great attention, of great memory, of great task completion. It's the inconsistency that is the hallmark of ADHD. And that's why we develop skill building, customized skill building within play attention so that we can help develop the skills and develop that cognitive control required for executive function. Nomi says, I would love to see a simulation of how play attention works. And that's good because that's what I'm going to show next. So thank you for that transition. I am going to show you in just a moment. Um, uh, so Aldine says, please repeat that last sentence. Aldine, play attention integrates feedback technology with cognitive skill training and behavior shaping to provide the most comprehensive approach available. That's actually what our patents are based on. It is the integration of those things because technology is great and cognitive training is great, behavior shaping is great, and you can find all of these different programs that do one or the other. But it is the combination we need in order to develop skills and also support. Because with play attention, you're not on your own. Everyone, whether you're a home client or a professional client, you are assigned a personal, dedicated focus coach. And the number one question we've been getting lately is it a real person? It is a real person. You get a dedicated focus coach to assist you every step of the way. So you're not on your own because we know that that interaction with a human, with someone to support you along your process, along your journey is a critical component. So we integrate that as well. And we make the invisible visible through the neurotechnology that we have here. So this is that body wave armband. And on the back, there are three sensors. When I slide this armband on my arm, those sensors are now monitoring my brain activity that tells us how attentive I am. And then that information is given over to the computer where I'm allowed to control all of the cognitive exercises just with my mind, or more specifically, my attention alone. And I receive constant and immediate feedback as to whether or not I truly am focused and paying attention. And that's a really important first step in the learning process, right? Because we discussed that focus is a combination of things, and focus is critically important to all of us and every skill we learn because we can have a fantastic teacher, we could have a great counselor, but if you're having a hard time paying attention to that individual or the process, then it's really difficult to get maximum benefit. So that's why we make certain that no matter what you're working on within play attention, you are actively engaged. So whether you're working on attention stamina or working memory or task completion, you have to be paying attention. If you're not paying attention, then the activity will stop, the character will go in the wrong direction, and you have to focus back in order to continue. And that's critically important. We make certain that whatever skill we've identified that's important for you or for your child or for your client, when you're working on that skill, you have to be actively engaged. If you're not, then the activity is going to tell you or it's going to stop. So you can only practice memory. You can only practice task completion if you are actively engaged. And now we're not just saying, pay attention, try harder, because we know that doesn't work, right? If we look at you and say, just try harder, just do better, that we're only causing stress. So, what we're doing within play attention is we're providing a feedback loop. We're providing you with an experience. Now you're going to see your attention, you're going to feel what you're doing, and you're allowed to practice. Okay? So, just as Naomi said, she wants to see a actual demonstration of this. So I am going to switch over and I'm going to actually share my play attention screen so that I can show you what that feedback looks like, because that is a critical component. Now, you see here all of these different cognitive exercises that we can incorporate into your plan. And these are important because remember, we talked about how a one size fits all approach is not enough. We have to have a customized program so that we know what we need to address within your plan. That's recognizing, noticing what you need and what skills are underdeveloped and what we need to develop. And that's what we will create in your customized plan. So when you're doing play attention, we're actually going to do an assessment of executive function. Right now, we're including that in your package. So you get an executive function assessment for you, for your child, for your clients, so that we can assess which cognitive skills are most important and then set the program up accordingly. And then we're going to take you through the practice session, which is your onboarding, because remember, you have someone helping you every step of the way. And then when you're doing your actual sessions, that's where we're incorporating, Aldine, the feedback technology with cognitive skill training and behavior shaping. So I have that body wave armband on. Remember that body wave armband is monitoring my brain activity that tells us how attentive I am. And then that information is given over to the computer. So I'm going to share with you this first exercise called attention stamina. And this is teaching me how to direct and sustain my attention to low stimuli at will. So if you were one of those people that said reading is so difficult for me, that is a really good example of a low stimuli activity. So this is where we're teaching you how to sustain your attention to an activity like reading or paying attention to the teacher in the classroom or your colleagues in the workplace, how to pay attention, how to direct and sustain attention to that low stimuli. Shava says, what is the armband monitoring? That armband is monitoring my brain activity indicative of attention. Okay. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. I guess we have time. I've been talking so much. I don't want to go over our time too much. But if you think about what attention is, right now you have billions of neurons firing in your brain at different times. But when all of those neurons fire in synchrony, when they all fire at one time, you give off a very specific electromagnetic signal, and that signal is what we know of as attention. And that's what that body wave armband is listening for. It's listening for that moment when you give off that signal, and it's communicating that to the computer so that you're able to see your attention in real time. So again, not just saying, Shava, pay attention. We're going to give you an experience where you see your attention, you feel what you're doing, and now you practice it. Okay? All right. Thank you, Charmaine. I understand you have to go, but you will receive the recording. All right. So I'm going to click play. I can choose from different characters, but one is this dolphin. When I click play, the very first thing you're going to see is a transition screen. So in a moment, you're going to see your game is loading. And that's just helping me transition from our conversation into the actual exercise itself. And once we get past this, you're going to see my character at the top of the screen. And I'm going to turn this down so you can hear me. You see my character at the top of the screen, and my attention meter is white because I'm not paying attention. I'm distracted. I'm talking to you. So now I'm going to stop our conversation. I'm going to pay attention to my task. Once I'm paying attention, I'm going to be able to swim him all the way down to the bottom of the ocean just with my mind alone, just with my attention. So I'm going to stop. Now that's as low as he goes. Now notice what happens as soon as I get off task, as soon as I get distracted. There's no one saying, just focus, just pay attention harder. I'm just getting this immediate feedback. Now I know I have to control my behavior, control my daydreaming, because a distraction can be a variety of things. It could be daydreaming, it could be anxiety, it could be someone walking into the room and I can't filter that noise. Immediately I get that feedback. Now I know I have to control that behavior, control that daydreaming, focus in. So isn't that amazing? Now, for the very first time, I have seen my attention. I feel what I'm doing and I'm allowed to practice it. And then I get all of this data that's stored for me that tells me how long I paid attention, what my percentage of attention was, what my recovery time was. And sheer genius, the artificial intelligence within Play Attention, is going to use that information to not only actually to not only document progress, but to also set mini goals. So now you saw that feedback loop where I was able to see my attention, feel what I was doing, and learn from that. And then, like I was saying, Sheer Genius is going to use that data, use that information to start setting mini goals. So the next time I log in, Sheer Genius will say, okay, yesterday you completed this with 70% attention. Today, let's try 72%. And if you do that, you earn a point, and the point goes into your reward system. So Play Attention is constantly documenting progress, setting mini goals, and then also watching for benchmarks. Because when you reach certain benchmarks, we're going to move you from bronze to silver to gold. So it becomes a little bit more challenging, and we're going to tie in more processes required for executive function, such as processing speed, impulse control, distractions, and mental flexibility. So it gets a little bit more complex. There are times you're going to have to respond using the mouse or the keyboard, but you're still driving everything with your attention. Okay. So I hope that gave you a good idea. I know it was just a little bit of a snippet on how play attention works and how important that is. But it is important that we are able to allow you to experience what it means for you personally to pay attention. And once you have that experience, then we can work on not only attention, but all of those other cognitive skills that are required for executive function. So, just one more poll I want you to think about before we go. What have you already tried? And you can just type in the chat box, and it might be a combination of these things. Have you tried medication, therapy, training, dietary changes, mindfulness apps, organization tools? What have you already tried? Okay, so many of you have tried medication or therapy, organization tools. Alan pretty much uh, Meds, therapy, apps, meant to try dietary. Okay, excellent. And, you see that you have tried a lot. Madeline says all of the above. Exactly. Many of you have multiple things that you've tried. And, some of you may have noticed that you've tried really hard at all of these. And the issue may be that the supports that you've tried haven't actually addressed the underlying skill system. That doesn't mean they don't have a role, right? Medication, therapy, uh, tutoring that we talked about, dietary changes, all of those can have a role. But at some point, we have to get to the root cause and identify the exact skill set, the exact skills that are required, that are weak right now, that we can strengthen. And then once we can identify the skills that are required within play attention, we can then set up your customized plan. We'll set up a customized plan to get to the root cause, to develop all of those areas, whether it's attention stamina, task completion, working memory, mindfulness. We'll set up your profile so that we're addressing all of those areas. And then once we look at those different areas, and we have your plan and you're developing those skills, we're going to work on that transfer and generalization of the skills. So we're developing the skills within play attention so that you can then take these skills that you've learned and apply them back into the classroom, into the workplace, or into the home. Okay. So tips, strategies, therapy, tutoring, dietary changes, those can all play a role. But remember, in order to develop skills, we have to get to the root and have a systematic way to develop each individual skill that's required for executive function so that you can then apply those skills into other areas of your life. And that's what we're going to do within play attention. So we customize your plan. We start with that assessment process so that we can pinpoint the underlying skills. We set up your profile and develop that customized plan. And then we assign you the dedicated focus coach who's going to help you every step of the way. And so once you start working, some of you had asked how often you'd have to work. Once you start doing your training, we recommend that you work at least an hour per week. And that hour, if you're doing this in a professional setting, you might do two 30-minute sessions. If you are working at home, you might do four 15-minute sessions. That's what a lot of our home clients do. And if you are doing a 15-minute session, that means when you log in, Sheer Genius, the artificial intelligence, is going to say, okay, we're going to work on attention stamina, time on task, and working memory. Not only that, but you'll have a mini goal for each exercise. So you log in, you do your 3 exercises, you log out, there's a journal, what I did well, what I'm proud of, and then you're done for the day. The next day, you log in, 3 new exercises, 3 new mini goals, log out, journal, done. That's kind of the process you're going to get into. And you'll start to see good results after about 6 weeks of consistent training. But the research shows in order to gain permanency, in order for us to know that not only will you have these skills now, but you'll have them throughout your lifetime, that usually takes about 40 hours total. So if you're working an hour per week, I would plan on about 10 months of consistent training. But everyone learns differently. So whether it takes you 10 months or 16 months, really doesn't matter. We continue working as long as necessary. And even once you graduate the program, if you want to continue using it for peak performance, you can do that. Your support is always there. Okay. So I hope this gives you a good understanding of how to reframe and really look at the challenges you're facing or the challenges your child is facing and recognize that focus is not just willpower. Behavior is often communication. Effort matters, but effort alone is not always enough. And we also talked about how executive function skills can be strengthened. And this real-time feedback that we do within play attention helps the brain learn. And that support will then carry over into the workplace, home, and the school situation so that you're getting that transfer and generalization. Jesse says, does insurance cover and is there a link? Traditional medical insurance usually will not cover play attention because we're not considered a medical device. We're considered cognitive training. So, but if you have an HSA or an FSA, those typically will cover. And I have a few different, if you would like to just keep your questions coming and I'll answer your questions, but I did want to touch on some of these next steps. If you would like to start your program, I know many of you wanted to start your program and you requested an extension of our Mother's Day special. Our Mother's Day special was 20% off, and that did end on Monday, but we did say that we would extend it for our webinar attendees. So we'll extend that through tomorrow because many of you wanted to attend this presentation before getting started and learning more about how we're going to customize your plan. So if you'd like to start your program, you can type in your phone number and we will give you a call to help you along the way. Or if you would like to just go to the eShop, we'll send you the link for the eShop. Jesse, you requested the link for the eShop. We can send that to you along with the Mother's Day code so you can take advantage of that 20% off. Also, if you would like to assess your baseline and see which cognitive exercises, remember there were 12 different exercises that I showed you, but if you wanted to get an idea of what exercises would be best for your plan, we do have an online ADHD test. This is a little bit more simplistic than the executive function assessment that's included with your package. But this one will ask you a series of questions, and then at the end, it will give you a summary and allow us to look at which cognitive skills would we recommend for your program. That just starts the journey as far as setting up your plan. Also, next week, I do hope you'll join us on our Silver Minds webinar. Because Silver Minds is our division of Play Attention, which is specifically for adults 50 years old and older. We focus on cognitive vitality for seniors. And we're about to launch our registration for our summer session. So if you're interested in Silver Minds, which again is our cognitive vitality package, it's our enhancement program for cognitive vitality for seniors. And we're about to start our summer session. We're going to talk about that next week on Thursday. I look forward to chatting with you very soon, seeing you at an upcoming webinar, or helping you get started on your play attention journey. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.